Welcome to the Justin Strawn Podcast. I am your host, Justin Strawn. Glad to be back with you for another week of recording here on the podcast feed. Appreciate everyone who is tuning in, whether or not if you're tuning in on TikTok Live. I appreciate all those who end up stopping by throughout the course of my broadcast. And I also appreciate all of you who listen to it after on the podcast platforms, whether it be Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever it may be. Appreciate you guys tuning into that. You can catch me on all those places. And it would do me a huge favor if you would just simply go on and click the like button, the subscribe button, the whatever button it is that you have an option to. And if you are able to write a review like on Apple Podcasts, that would help me out a whole lot as well. Also, on all social media platforms, obviously, since I'm recording live on TikTok, we have TikTok available for you guys. I put a lot of clips up on TikTok after I record. I've got Twitter, been on Twitter since 2013, Instagram, Facebook, all of it, guys. I would like to appreciate if you can like and subscribe and follow and all that fun stuff on all of those places. All right, let's go ahead and get into the show. We have a lot to talk about this week. Sorry I did not get a chance to record a second episode last week. When you don't do this for a living, sometimes you have to just kind of do it when you can, and that was definitely the case for me last week. So I only got one show in. But we will be looking at what Mississippi State has been doing in the transfer portal. We'll take a look at what the men's basketball team has done over the past two games, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We will also be taking a look at the college football playoff and how it just shook out on Thursday and Friday night with Indiana and Miami advancing to the college football playoff championship. And last but not least, we will take a look. Well, actually, no, we'll take a look at Conformity Gate on Netflix. Obviously, a lot of people, there was a big theory about Stranger Things. I call it Conformity Gate. I'll weigh in on that real quick at one point later on the show. And then I will finish off the show with my top 10 movies of 2025. So appreciate you guys tuning in. Like I said, so let's go ahead and get into it. All right, let's start with the transfer portal. That's the big news right now because Mississippi State, there's only one window for the transfer portal now. There used to be a window earlier and then another one in the spring, but that is no longer the case. It allows coaches to kind of have a better idea of what their roster is actually going to be like when they hit once this window is closed. It will give them a better idea of what their actual team will look like when we hit the field on Labor Day weekend in 2026. Look, here's the thing with Mississippi State in the transfer portal. They've actually done really well in the transfer portal, but you wouldn't know it from a lot of fan reaction to the way that Mississippi State has, with the players they have brought in. They brought in some really good wide receivers. They brought in some really good pieces along the defense. I think they've gotten a couple of defensive linemen. They've gotten some help in the secondary. They've got some, like I said, they got a couple of really good wide receivers that are coming in one's from Missouri. I can't remember where the other one's from. They've made a lot of really good pickups in the transfer portal. The problem is they've only picked up, I think, 3 offensive linemen, and that is by far the biggest need that Mississippi State has. And one of the things that is happening with a lot of Mississippi State fans is they are getting, every time that a transfer portal acquisition pops up on their Twitter feed, their Facebook feed, whatever it may be, the first thing you see in the comments, the replies, where's the offensive lineman? We need an offensive lineman. Look, that is by far easily the biggest need that Mississippi State has. We have a big need for really good, solid SEC caliber offensive linemen. There is no question about it. The offensive line that we have had the past 2 years in the Jeff Lebby era has been pathetic. It's been an absolute joke of an offensive line. So it's really annoying that, we're not getting possibly the depth and the experience and the quality of the players that we want along the offensive line. But we're still getting some really good players. Look, with the additions that we're making on the defense in the portal, with the additions that we've made in the secondary and along the defensive line in the transfer portal, I really think this defense is going to make a pretty big step forward. I think they have a chance with a good defensive coordinator now that Zach Arnett is back. I think this defense has a chance to be a top half SEC defense, a potential top top 50 defense in the country, whereas they were next to last this year, whereas Arkansas was the only team that was worse than them defensively. And last year they were so bad that they weren't even close to any of the other SEC teams. I really think that this defense is going to make a significant improvement, and that alone should translate into at least 1 or 2, possibly 3 more wins for Mississippi State going into the 2026 football season. I really think that is something that will definitely take place once we get into the season. But the problem is the offense, well, even with the addition of the wide receivers that we picked up, I think we also picked up a tight end. Even with those additions, I don't know how much better the offense is going to be because the offensive line hasn't gotten a lot of additional help so far. But that doesn't mean that we can't celebrate the players that we are getting, because they are getting some really solid players. It's just not as many as we want. But we should still celebrate those guys that are coming in, because they will lead to an improved football team. It may not be as improved as we would like for it to be, but it is still an improved football team. And here's the problem that I have. And look, if you've listened to me since I started this podcast up, about 2 months ago, if you listen to me, if you found me on TikTok, whatever it may be, however it is that you have come across my account, one of the things I have said, one of the things I will continue to say about Mississippi State under the Jeff Lebby era is I didn't think Jeff Lebby was a great hire. I was cautiously optimistic about the team possibly picking up some much needed momentum with Jeff Lebby coming in. That was kind of my hope, but unfortunately, I don't think we have seen that, and I'm not really certain that we're going to see a whole lot of growth and improvement in 2026. I hope so. I don't want to have to hire another coach after just 3 years under Jeff Lebby. So I am hoping and praying that Mississippi State can make the necessary improvements and make a decent enough jump where they can get to at least 7 wins. That way they can keep him. Now, I've seen some people say you got to get to 8 for him to stick around. I just don't see them doing that. If they go to 7 wins, that's 2 straight years of pretty vast improvement under the same head coach. I don't see them making a change if Mississippi State ends up winning 7 games next year. So that's my hope. As much as I have been disappointed by the Jeff Lebby era, and as much as I've not been really surprised by the fact that it has not been all that successful, I don't want them to have to try to find another coach next year. I want this to work out. I want to eventually be proven wrong that Jeff Lebby was a good hire and that he can get this team, at least in the playoff conversation. Because if you're a top 25 team, then you're in the conversation of the college football playoff. And like I said, I think that's something that Mississippi State can definitely do. But the problem is, because Jeff Lebby, because he's so young and so inexperienced, and because I don't think he was quite ready to handle the stress and the difficulties that comes with coaching, being the head coach of an SEC football team, he made no changes to his staff after the 2024 season. As bad as that was, after a 2-10 season in which you not only lost to Toledo, but got blown out of the water by Toledo at home, after you had this really, really awful first season, you make absolutely no changes to your coaching staff because you want continuity. And we talked about this, and other podcasts have talked about it. One of the reasons why he didn't want to make changes, didn't want to rough the waters up, is because those were his buddies. These are the people that are on his staff, are his friends. I'm assuming he made this promise to them that, once he got to be a head coach, he put them on his staff and they would all have jobs on his staff. And that's been the issue that Mississippi State has had under Jeff Lebby. And because he didn't want to make those changes after that first year, there wasn't enough of an improvement in year 2, because you really needed to you got to a bowl, but you got in because other people opted out. And because of your APR score, you get into a bowl, and actually a pretty decent bowl in the Dukes Mayo Bowl, because of the fact that you didn't make those changes at the end of 2024. Now you're having to make changes here at the end of 2025. And look, I don't know if this is the case, but it wouldn't surprise me if this is the case at all. One of the reasons why I don't think he's made a change from Coach Lodeholt is because, and Coach Lodeholt is the offensive line coach, if you don't know who that is because I don't know that he can get anybody else. He was able to get a new defensive coordinator, so he's able to replace Coleman Hutzler, but I don't know that he's been able to find anybody to take Lodeholt's place. I just don't know that's going to be the case, because you're coming in, and if you don't make a significant improvement in 2026, everybody on that staff is going to be looking for a new job, because you're going to have to replace Lebby, and whoever ends up replacing Lebby is going to end up bringing in their own guys. So this is the problem that Jeff Lebby gave himself when he refused to make any changes to his staff after a dreadful opening year in 2024. And now he's reaping the consequences of it. Look, I think Mississippi State is probably going to get some offensive linemen. Like I said, they've gotten three. I think they've gotten three. I know two of one of them is Nash from Florida State. There was some drama around his signing, but he did actually sign. But Nash, who's from Florida State. And you also have a offensive lineman from Arkansas who is coming over. So that should be a good improvement. Look, Arkansas, as many problems they had, offense was not their biggest issue. That guy's that's an encouraging sign that you're getting those two guys. So those two guys should bring some relief to this beleaguered group of offensive linemen, but you got to get some more. Apparently there's some people as well. They've got visitors coming in. I expect them to get some additional help along the offensive line, but it's just going to take a little bit of time, and it's going to take money. And here's the deal. We can't spend every dime that we have in NIL on the offensive line. We have other needs. We needed more receivers because Brandon Thompson did not get his extra year of eligibility. He did his 6th year, which most people, I think, kind of expected that not to happen. So we didn't get Brandon Thompson back. We got to get Anthony Evans, for all intents and purposes. It looks like he's going to come back. So you got to get somebody to go alongside him. And they've gotten some wide receivers. Like I said, they needed help in the defense. The defensive secondary was such a weakness last year, with the exception of Kelly Jones. It looks like it might end up being one of the better units in the SEC next year with the additions that they have made in the secondary. So they've done a really good job of filling these other needs. They just got to go in and fill these offensive line needs. But that doesn't mean we can't be happy with the ones that they are getting, even if it isn't an offensive lineman. Like I said, it kind of throws a wet blanket on these guys, and they're coming in there signing, and Mississippi State's football account tweets out, "Welcome to Starkville," or Stark Vegas, or whatever it is whenever they send out those announcements. And then the very first thing that those players go and read is, "Where's the offensive lineman? Why don't we get an offensive lineman?" That's got to really throw a wet blanket on those guys and their excitement for coming to the program, when they see that fans don't really care about them coming because of the fact that they don't play along the offensive line. So like I said, we have other needs, and we got to fill those needs just as much as we got to fill the offensive line. So like I said, enjoy the fact that they are getting some good players, because that was the problem that we had after last year. They brought in a whole bunch of people in the transfer portal, but many of them just didn't end up contributing because of the fact that they weren't SEC caliber players. They seem to be doing that this year, and that's an encouraging sign. Like I said, I really want to be wrong about Jeff Lebby. I really do. I want him to prove me wrong and say, "Hey, look, I am actually a really good coach. I am a really good coach, and I can improve this team," but I just haven't seen it so far, and it is kind of frustrating. All right, let's take a look at the basketball team. State's men's basketball team had a pretty good week last week. They ended up, obviously, they beat Texas in the SEC opener, and they beat them on the road. Then they go home and end up just mollywopping Oklahoma at home last week. But I was concerned going into the Kentucky game because I have seen this game play out before. There has been times towards the end of the Calipari era and here at the beginning of the Mark Pope era for Kentucky, where Kentucky has come into the game against Mississippi State not playing as well as they normally do, playing below Kentucky level expectations, and Mississippi State is kind of riding a wave of momentum, and they still end up losing a game that they probably shouldn't. Look, Mississippi State was an 11.5 point underdog at one point throughout the course of the week going into this game, so the fact they lost shouldn't be that surprising, but it's disappointing that they end up losing the game to Kentucky, because it was an opportunity to get off to a 3-0 start, because you have now a pretty difficult stretch coming up over the next couple of weeks. On Tuesday night, they take on Alabama at 8 o'clock. This is a team that Mississippi State has not beaten since Nate Oates took over the coaching duties at Alabama. So this is not a game that Mississippi State has had a whole lot of success in the past. Then they go on the road on Saturday to Ole Miss. Look, Ole Miss has not been that good this year, but neither has Mississippi State. They haven't been that good either. Mississippi State's been better in SEC play, but Ole Miss is still led by a really good coach in Chris Beard, and it is Ole Miss, so it's rival game, and you never know what can happen on that. So you got to go on the road to Oxford on Saturday. Then the following week, you have Texas A&M and Vanderbilt. Now, I think both of those games are at home, but those are two teams that are playing incredibly well. Texas A&M is off to a 3-0 start in SEC play, and wouldn't surprise me if they end up getting ranked in the top 25. Vanderbilt is probably going to be a top 10 team after the rankings released this week. So you've got a stretch of 4 games that are going to be really, really difficult. You get off to a great 2-0 start, and you had an opportunity to go 3-0 against Kentucky, and you were at one point against Kentucky. It looked like they were about to run away. They were going to just completely run away from them. They were up by 12 about halfway through the first half, and then Mark Pope takes time out. He gets his guys focused. They end up clawing back, taking a slight lead in the first half, and end up just blowing the doors open the last half of the second half. And like I said, it's just kind of disappointing. Offensively, Mississippi State looked okay. Let me pull up the numbers real quick. But offense was not really the issue for Mississippi State when they played them on Saturday night. They are actually one of the things that I've been hoping and begging for. It looks like there is a clear number 1, number 2, and number 3 player. And that's kind of what you want for a team. You just want to have, a clear line of who's going to be our best players, who's going to be our guys that we can count on to get us points, do whatever it may be. And for the most part, it looks like they've kind of figured that out. You've got Josh Hubbard, who has just been incredible, especially in SEC play. He's been knocking shots down left and right. His field goal percentage, with the exception of the Texas game, has been really, really good. Like I said, he's averaging something around 30 points a game in SEC play, somewhere around there. I'm not exactly sure what he's averaging, but it's close to that in SEC play, probably high 20s after Saturday, because he ended up having 20 points, 7 of 16 from the field, only 2 of 8 from 3-point range. But one of the things that I love that Josh Hubbard has done this year is Hubbard has decided he's not going to just try to make his living behind the 3-point line. That was kind of what he did a lot in his first 2 years. He has made a much more consistent effort to try to find other ways to score and to get his points, especially when the 3-point shot isn't falling for him like you would like it to. Like I said, 7 of 16 from a guard is really, really good. You want your guard shooting around 45, 48% is kind of what you're looking for. You'd like for him to shoot a little bit better from 3-point range, but it is what it is. Jay Nips goes for 13 as well. Right about his average. He's a little bit under. I think he's averaging 15 or 16 points per game. But the encouraging sign that you've had these past 3 games is Achor has really stepped up into that third man role. I said last time I recorded, I just want him averaging around 10 points a game, getting 10 to 12 rebounds a game. And that's exactly what he did on Saturday. He ended up scoring 13 points, had 11 rebounds. But the problem is he had 4 turnovers as well. And that's one thing that he's got to get better at. He's got to take better care of the ball when he has it. So that's one of the things that we're going to need to see improvement from him for. Like I said, offense really wasn't the problem. They shot 48% from the field, but they did only shoot 15% from 3-point range. The only 2 players who made any 3-pointers were Epps and Hubbard, and they both went 3 of 15. The rest of the team went 0 of 5 from 3-point range. When they're not hitting the 3-pointers, it makes it tough because that's kind of one of the things that you can do to get yourself back in the game, but it just kind of fell apart. I mean, they only scored 68 points against Kentucky. Most of that came in the first half. What happened is the defense just fell apart in the second half. Kentucky ends up scoring 92 points. And basically, the defense just completely fell apart, and they just couldn't get a stop at one point, and they just get completely disengaged. And look, this happens almost every single time that Mississippi State plays Kentucky. I'm not surprised in the least by it, but it happens, and it drives you crazy because Mississippi State has never played well against Kentucky. I don't know when the last time they won at Rupp Arena was, but you had an opportunity to beat this team. This is a Kentucky team that was reeling, and you had a chance to get off to a really good start, and you just don't end up taking advantage of it. Look, if they can come out and finally get a win against Alabama and Nate Oates tomorrow, your season is looking really good at that point because you probably have a lot more confidence going into Oxford on Saturday to go in and win that game. And then, like I said, you've got pretty certain they got Texas A&M and Vanderbilt at home following that game. Yeah. Well, now they go on the road to Texas A&M, and they've got Vanderbilt at home. So, like I said, you really need to go 2-2 over these next 4 games. You need to find a way to get at least 2 wins, and it's not going to be easy, but they've got to figure out a way to get it done. If they could go 3-1 or 4-0, that'd be fantastic. But you got to find a way to get to at least 2-2. My goal, like I said last week, was try to get to 6-3 at the end of January. If you go 2-2, you've got a chance to still do that because you've got Missouri and you've got LSU. You got LSU on the road and you got Missouri on the road. So it's, again, it won't be easy, but they can definitely get to 6 wins if they can go 2-2 over these next 4 games. They just got to do it. So for the women's basketball team, guys, I'm probably not going to talk that much about the women's basketball team after today. They continue to, after the win against Auburn, they are now 1-3. Only one of those 3 wins has looked competitive, and that was against Tennessee. And it wasn't even that competitive. They lost by 10. But this was the thing that I was worried about when I saw them playing so well in the non-conference portion of the schedule. But when you look at their schedule, it was just an absolute one right after the other of teams that just weren't very good. And there was no real reason to get incredibly excited about the start they got off to, because they just weren't playing that good a competition. And that ends up being the case again that ends up being the case this past Saturday as well against Ole Miss. And it's just so discouraging that, Sam Purcell has made the NCAA tournament, I think, every year that he's been there. But this team is not looking real. It's not looking real promising for this team to get into the NCAA tournament, because I just don't know that they're going to win more than 3 or 4. It doesn't look like we're going to get more than 3 or 4 SEC wins. It just doesn't. We'll see. I don't know. Like I said, if they start to prove me wrong, I'll come back to them. But I just don't foresee myself talking too much about them over the course of the next couple of weeks. All right, real quick, let's talk about Conformity Gate. Apparently, my entire TikTok feed, because I posted some videos about Stranger Things, has become all Stranger Things. Every time I log on to TikTok, the first thing I see is something about Stranger Things. But I did want to chime in about this, because one of the theories that was going around last week was on Wednesday of last week, I think January 7th, this theory emerged that it came from people who were not happy with the way the Stranger Things finale went down, that Conformity Gate was going to take place, and that there was going to be that the series finale that we got with episode 8 of Stranger Things in season 5 wasn't the real finale. And we were going to get the real finale this past Wednesday on January 7th, because they had all these clues out there, all this stuff about, the dial on the meter at the squawk. There was stuff about the battle taking place too quickly. And basically this idea was that Vecna actually won. Look, here's the deal with this. I don't care what proof people were pointing to in terms of Stranger Things possibly having a secret real series finale that was going to release later. Netflix put episode 8, the actual series finale, in theaters for people to go watch it and have this theatrical experience to see the Stranger Things finale. There was no way there was going to be another episode after you go through all that trouble to give people this great theater experience, and then you go off and release a secret episode, a week later. That just wasn't going to happen. I mean, logic should have told people who were publishing all this stuff about Conformity Gate and about how we're getting this, it's definitely happening. There was so much being out there about that. And just look at that one thing alone. There was no way that Netflix was going to undercut what they did in terms of putting the series finale into theaters for people to go and watch it there, and then just completely undercut that by releasing another episode a week later. That just wasn't going to happen. If you didn't like it, that's fine. I thought the series finale was great. The first half I thought it was good. I didn't think that part of it was great, but I thought the epilogue was fantastic. I thought it was just an absolutely wonderful way to send off these characters. There will probably be spinoffs and things like that, but for this core cast of characters, I thought that was a really great send-off for them, especially with that epilogue, basically the last hour of the finale. I thought that was perfect. But if you didn't like it, that's fine. People like different things. And if you didn't like the way that the finale played out, that's fine. But that doesn't mean we need to start thinking, well, then if we didn't like it, this can't be it. This can't possibly be the finale. We didn't like it, so it can't be the way that the series is actually going to close out. Yeah. People get disappointed. Look at Game of Thrones. People were disappointed in the way the Game of Thrones played out. I was disappointed in the way the Game of Thrones played out at the end, but it happens. There are always going to be people who are not going to be happy with the way a show wraps up. That's just the way it's going to be. It's hard to close out a show successfully. It really is. It's hard to make it where everybody likes it. There's a lot of people who wanted there to be more carnage amongst that core cast of characters, but there were some who were like, no, it's fine. I mean, when we're talking about People said it's just not realistic that all these kids, all these people survive. But we're talking about a show that's dealing with demogorgons and an alternate dimension that's just on the other side of our dimension. It's not supposed to be believable. All right. Well, I'll finish up real quick with my top 10 movies of 2025. So let me get my list pulled up. I talked about when I was doing my top 10 TV shows of 2025. One of the things I said was, there was a lot of really good shows. There's a lot of really bad shows. Movies I thought were pretty good. I didn't see a ton of movies in theaters this year. There are still a few movies I have not seen that I want to see. For example, I've not seen Wicked for Good. I saw the first Wicked, and it was one of my favorite movies of 2024. But Wicked for Good, still have not seen it. Hoping to catch it relatively soon. I have not seen... What have I not seen? I haven't seen Marty Supreme. That looks really good. Really looking forward to catching it. I'm not an Avatar fan, so I'll catch Avatar Ash and Fire at some point, but my guess is it was never going to make my list because I'm just not that huge a fan of Avatar. There has been, like I said, there's been a lot of really good movies. And I think this is a pretty good year for movies overall. So let's go ahead and get into it. My number 10 movie for 2025 is probably not one on a whole lot of other people's list, but I really enjoyed this one. It is Ballerina. It's the Ana de Armas John Wick spinoff film. I thought it was really good. I love the creativity of it, and this is one of the reasons why I enjoyed it so much, is just because they understood what they had. They had a very small petite girl or petite actress in Ana de Armas, and making her overpower other people as her way of killing people just would not have worked. So they gave her some of the most inventive, creative ways to kill people. I don't know how many times we saw her use grenades in interesting ways to blow people up. She used plates. She used lots of different ways to kill people because she's a small person. And it would not have made a whole lot of sense to see her overpower other people in that film. And I thought it just worked really well. I don't think it really needed John Wick, but they needed to sell tickets to that thing. That's the reason they ended up putting him in the film as much as they did. But I thought it was a really good film and I enjoyed it. Number 9 for me on my list of top 10 is The Phoenician Scheme. It was Wes Anderson's most recent film in 2025. I love Wes Anderson. I think a lot of what he does is good. There are some movies I don't quite jive with, but that's the case for a lot of people with Wes Anderson. He has a very particular storytelling method, and he tells film movies in certain ways, and not everybody jives with it. And what it normally does. I thought Phoenician Scheme was really good. It's not my favorite. I didn't like it as much as Asteroid City. I thought Asteroid City was better. And obviously, I think Royal Tenenbaums was better as well. But I thought it was still a really good film. I love the performances. Wes Anderson always attracts a really stellar cast to his films, and this one was no different. I enjoyed his outing for 2025 immensely. Number 8 for me is one of the MCU films that released this year, Thunderbolts. I thought Thunderbolts was a much needed MCU film. It didn't make a ton of money at the box office, probably even lost money if I had to guess. But the one thing that I liked about Thunderbolts is they really got back to what made MCU movies good. They focused on what makes a superhero great, what makes us want to look up to superheroes, and they focused on the story a lot more than just trying to put up a bunch of CGI slopping. Some people might say that there was plenty of that as well. It's up for debate, but I really enjoyed the film. I thought it was a really great cast of characters. It was a lot of people that we haven't spent a whole lot of time with, and it just worked out really well. Like I said, I thought this was a really fun film. I enjoyed it. We got some really great performances as well. Florence Pugh is... The fact that Florence Pugh, who is probably going to win at least 1 or 2 Oscars before her time is up as an actress in the MCU, is just absolutely fantastic. And they need to try to make her at the centerpiece of a lot of their films as much as they can, because she's just absolutely amazing. Number 7 for me. This is one that I think, for me, suffered from the hype. Sinners. A lot of people have Sinners as like their number 1 or number 2 film of the year. I liked Sinners. I really did, but I have it at number 7. It's a really good film. I think it's fun. I think a lot of it, I think it's by far a better film up until we get to the vampire stuff. The vampire stuff isn't all that interesting to me but everything that's happening before it really, really is. It takes place in a setting that's not too far from where I live, probably about an hour and a half away from where I live. It's a really good film, but like I said, I was expecting to just be completely blown away, and I thought it was really good, but I wasn't just blown away by it like a lot of people were once I finally saw it, because as many people talked about it as they did, I was expecting it to be just absolutely amazing. Hey, Daniel Black's on here. I didn't realize Daniel was on Twitter. Hey, Daniel, how you doing, bud? On TikTok. I'm about to actually see somebody I know, who's actually who I actually follow on social media. So good to see you, Daniel. But yeah, like I said, Sinners I thought was good, but I don't have it quite as high as everybody else does. Number 6 for me is Frankenstein. This is one I know a lot of people didn't have quite as high. It's the newest film from, what's his name? I can't remember his name now. Uh, anyway, I'll have to look it up later. But it was a Netflix film. They did actually put it in some theaters, but I really thought this was a standout film. I thought it was absolutely beautiful. I loved the take on the story. The Frankenstein story is just one of my favorites in general. So, like I said, I like the fact that they were willing to do some things with it, and I found this one immensely enjoyable. So, like I said, I really enjoyed Frankenstein on Netflix earlier this year. And if you haven't checked it out, I would highly recommend you going onto Netflix and taking a look at it. Number 5 for me, it's the first film in the new DCU, that is Superman. I loved Superman. I was really excited to get this. I know a lot of the Snyder Bros didn't like this. And that's fine. You don't have to like it. It's not for everyone. The Snyderverse era of DC Comics it's not what those stories are supposed to be, and it's definitely not what Superman is supposed to be. Superman is supposed to be a man of hope, a man that we can look up to, a man that inspires people to try to be greater things. And look, I like Henry Cavill, but the Superman that was created by Zack Snyder is none of those things. It's just not. And I don't know why people are so in love with those films. And look, you can like what you like, but I really like this a lot more. I thought this year's Superman was just wonderful. I think it's a good start for the DCU. It's a little bloated. It's got a lot of characters in it. And that's probably one of my biggest complaints about it is, there are just so many characters and a lot of things going on. But it is the start of what's going to be a cinematic universe. So I understand um, why that is the case. And next is number 4, Black Bag. If you didn't see Black Bag, you're not alone. A lot of people didn't see it, but it's just one of the most amazing films. It was my number 1 film it was my number 2 film at the halfway point this year. It fell a little bit after I watched a couple other films, but I love Black Bag. It's got a great cast. It's just absolutely fantastic. Michael Fassbender is great in it. No credit, and forgot the lady who's the main lead in it. What is her name? But she's just fantastic in it as well. She's won like 4 Oscars. But yeah, those two are just absolutely fantastic. The supporting cast is great. It's a lot of upcoming actors. I expect to see a lot of them. It's only 90 minutes long. It's a really fun film. If you like spy thriller type films, and you haven't seen it, definitely go check out Black Bag. Like I said, number 4 for me this year. I thought it was just absolutely fantastic. In another year, maybe it gets Oscar consideration, but unfortunately, it's probably not going to this year. Number 3 for me is Fantastic Four. I really enjoyed this most recent MCU entry. And look, I know a lot of people didn't like it as much as Superman. I personally liked it more. I thought this was just an absolutely amazing film. It didn't make as much money as they were hoping, and that's kind of one of the things that has Disney concerned right now is that MCU films aren't making money the way that they used to. But I love the Fantastic Four. I thought it was just absolutely nailed the vibe of what the Fantastic Four is supposed to be. It really understood what this group of superheroes is supposed to be about, who they are in relation to the world that they live in. And I just really enjoyed this. I know a lot of people were disappointed because Pedro Pascal's Reed Richards is one of the more boring Reed Richards that we've had. But I think that is a strength of the film because we're going to have plenty of time for Reed Richards in films to come to be the Reed Richards that we all think of and to be the genius, the maniacal genius that he is, the guy who a lot of people classify as not just a hero, but an anti-hero. And some people will even call him a villain. And like I said, we have time to explore that later on. I think they really just wanted to give the other members who kind of get shoved off into the background, Johnny Storm, his wife, the Thing, give those characters a little bit more attention and just really focus on them. I thought, I thought the Human Torch and the Thing were just absolutely fantastic in this. They were 2 of the better ones. Sue Storm was really good. I think Vanessa Kirby was really good in that role. She had the worst scene, in my opinion, though, with that speech that she gave. I just don't think that was really good writing on their part. But I love this film. Like I said, I've been waiting for a Fantastic Four film to be good for a long time. Fantastic Four was my entrance into comics, and it was my entrance into the world of comic book storytelling. So, like I said, they're not my favorite comic. They're pretty far up there. But I've been waiting for a good Fantastic Four film because of the fact that they are such a pivotal part of my journey into comic book storytelling. Number 2 is I probably have higher than a lot of people. That is Wake Up Dead Man. It's the newest Knives Out film. I really enjoyed this one. It wasn't quite as funny as the previous ones, but I don't think it was supposed to be. It really had co-leads for this one. Look, probably the only thing with doing the co-leads for this is it made all the other actors that you had in this, all the other really talented actors that you have in this, not have a whole lot to do. But I thought the story was great. I thought the way that he was looking at religion and how he wasn't, it's really easy to, just say religion's awful and it's bad and it's causing problems. That wasn't the critique that he was giving in this. The critique that he was giving in it is the people who use religions for nefarious purposes. That's the real issue. And that it's not that the religion is the problem, or that Christianity or Catholicism is the problem. It's the way that some people use those for their own personal gain. That's the real problem. That's one of the things that he was looking at. I just thought this movie was just absolutely fantastic. I really enjoyed it. I love the Knives Out films. I think they're great. Daniel Craig is just absolutely wonderful in this role. And, I don't know if they're planning on doing any more. I hope they do, because you can just tell a completely different story every time that you want to. And you can just pick up wherever you send this character wherever you want in the world, and it will just work out perfectly well. So like I said, I really enjoyed this film. I thought it was really well done. Number 1, I thought was going to have the same issue that Sinners had for me, and that was suffering from being too overhyped. And that is One Battle After Another. I didn't see it in theaters. I wanted to, but I didn't get a chance to go see it in theaters. And as much as people were praising it, as much as people were talking about it, I just assumed One Battle After Another would not be able to live up to the expectations that were being put out there for it. And it did. Look, the first 15, 20 minutes, I was starting to think that was going to be the case, because I wasn't just really thrilled with that portion of the film. But once we get past the point where he and his, I don't think they ever got married, but he and his lover end up going separate ways, and Leonardo DiCaprio's character becomes a single dad who's just trying to look out for his daughter. That all works so incredibly well. It is a very harsh criticism of the right-wing politicians and everything that they are doing in society today. But Thomas Anderson is also doing some criticism for people on the left as well. He's not letting them completely off the hook. One of the reasons why I think the first 15, 20 minutes is so important, even if I didn't enjoy it quite as much as I did the rest of the film, is because he's basically setting up where, a lot of people who are protesting and trying to rebel against the system aren't necessarily doing it for the betterment of society. They're doing it for the betterment of themselves. That's one of the reasons why his lover and, what's his name? I can't remember the guy who played the bad guy in this. Sean Penn. Sean Penn's character. The reason why I think they are attracted to each other isn't because they necessarily love each other. It's because they're attracted by the power that each has and the power that they can wield over other people. And I think that's one of the reasons why they end up being attracted to each other. But like I said, this film is just so incredibly good. It's shot beautifully. It's an absolutely epic piece of filmmaking. It's probably my favorite Paul Thomas Anderson film. I know a lot of people have Boogie Nights above it, and that's fine. But I love this film. I thought it was just absolutely fantastic. I came into it, like I said, thinking that I wasn't going to like it as much as everybody else did. But I ended up being absolutely enthralled by it. I thought it was great. I was really enjoying it. I hope and pray that it gets its flowers at the Oscars, and I'm sure that it will. So anyway, let me wrap up my top 10 real quick. So number 10 was Ballerina. Number 9, The Phoenician Scheme. Number 8 was Thunderbolts. Daniel, you missed that part. I haven't seen Marty Supreme yet. I plan on catching it a little bit later on, but I do want to watch it. I just haven't had a chance to see it yet. My guess is it's probably pretty good, if I had to guess, because of the fact that Timothy Chalamet is just absolutely awesome. But yeah, number 8 is Thunderbolts. Number 7 is Sinners. Number 6, Frankenstein. Number 5, Superman. 4, Black Bag. 3, Fantastic Four. 2, Wake Up Dead Man. And number 1 is One Battle After Another. All right, I've got to sign off and get started on my real job. So appreciate everybody tuning in. I appreciate all that catch me on TikTok or catch me on the podcast apps. I appreciate all you guys. And I guess I'll get to it.